Hi there, welcome. I am Dr. Jill Wener. I have Dr. Toni Haley with me, who I will introduce in a second. I am a physician, and I am now an expert in physician wellness, including tapping and meditation. And I've been doing a series of interviews during COVID to help bring to light a lot of issues that have been there beforehand and now are being brought to light or magnified by COVID. So these interviews have ranged from social disparities and racial disparities and health disparities to issues that have come up raising autistic children at home, and issues that are coming up for physicians and for other people who are high-powered professionals. So I have with me Dr. Toni Haley, who is one of my new favorite people. She is a best-selling author, a TEDx speaker. She's the founder of Soar to Excellence Coaching, and she uses amazing strategies to help her clients, including the Martyr Mindset, which we're going to talk about today. And Dr. Haley, she gets it, and she's going to give you a little bit of tough love, and she's going to tell you the way she works with people, she actually helps you change your life, but you got to make the changes to do it. So that's what I so connect with about you, because it's about accountability and people taking responsibility. So Dr. Toni, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you do? We'll give people how to contact you later, but what's the work you do? What are you really passionate about?
Well, I'm really, really passionate about you making your time on earth matter. And I think most of us who are physicians, especially, or people in leadership roles, we have a tendency to think that our job or our profession is enough. And that's going to be it for us. And that's the end of the road. And the buck stops there. And most people who come to me or find me, it's because they're lacking fulfillment. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey of leaving corporate and going into medicine. I realized that, okay, it's going to be an MBA or an MD. And I really didn't feel in the business world that I had that power to touch humans one on one and really make an impact every day. So I said, you know what? I have all the prereqs. I'm going to go ahead and pursue my original dream as a 10-year-old to go back to medicine. And I enjoyed that journey until I didn't. I enjoyed working with people. I enjoyed helping people, everything. I sounded like the med school, essay. And I
Lifelong,
realized what were you
I
saying?
said lifelong learning.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
amazing. And we're nerds at heart. Most of us are these go-getters. We're straight A students. We're made for this stuff. And then we come to this realization at the end of this conveyor belt that, wait a minute, these corporate people, they're kind of not, wait, this is corporate again. Hold on, this isn't what I signed up for. So I was very determined to be a business owner. And the thing about ownership is you do have more flexibility. So I came out of school, came out of training, and I became a contractor right away because I really wanted to own my own company and have more autonomy and flexibility. So it was a great journey for me because I was able to do a lot of the things that I hadn't been able to do all my life. I was able to make my own schedule, figure out how I wanted to structure my days, if you will, and decide when I was going to take time off and be unavailable. Oh my gosh, what a blessing that is, because it came to me all of a sudden that I had fallen into a trap. I
Mhm.
was on the beach answering emails with my new husband. It happens to all of us. We think we've gotten away. We start our career, we're doing a great job, and then suddenly that flexibility and autonomy starts to slip away because we're going for it again. We're falling into an old habit, if you will. And my old habit was to be a workaholic. It was that constant satisfaction, gratification. It's like a feedback loop of outside validation made me think, oh, I'm away, but just 2 more hours. And I was up at the crack of dawn on vacation. And my husband looked at me and he said, this, at the time we were engaged or, going to be married. And he said, this isn't what you told me, this isn't what I signed up for. I thought we were over this. I thought we were done with this. And so then I became a certified executive coach because I realized a lot of people fall into that habit trap, that habit trail. And now I have the flexibility and autonomy and health, wellness holistically that I was looking for originally. But it's some ups and downs and bumpy roads to get there.
That's incredible. And so, and by contractor, you mean you did locums work? Is that what you mean by that?
Hmm.
Okay.
I
So
did locums work and traveled, and these are things you want as a young person, right? You're like, man, I want to see the world. Oh, and you'll pay me to do it, and I can tell you when I'm available and when I'm not. So this was like a really great balance for me originally. But when I changed how I, wanted to live my life as a engaged or married woman and a bonus mom and things like that, I kind of wanted more stability, and that's where I got in trouble again. I was working locally on contract
mm,
and started falling into that trap of working from home after work. And we've all done it, putting in the extra hours and answering emails at crazy times.
it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we all, and it's something that I still struggle with, which is the feeling of I am enough no matter what. Like I don't need any of those outside things, but we fall into that. Oh, if I have to get this course ready, I have to do this. And leaving that behind in my medical career now to do what I do, there's still, and with COVID, it's almost magnified because it's like, I have to do everything for everybody because this is when people need me the most. And it's just like, it's really easy to fall into those traps. So I know that this already what you're saying is resonating with me. And I know that it's going to be resonating with the people who are watching this, that there's a different way. So can you talk about what are some things that were happening for women physicians and women professionals before COVID? You already mentioned these habit traps, but what are some of the big themes that you see in terms of the way that these high powered women live their lives and lead themselves to unhappiness unintentionally usually?
Most of the time, if I were to say, and we see ourselves a certain way. So you don't want to say these words out loud, like, I'm not a people pleaser.
Mhm.
You don't think of yourself as a people pleaser, but your habits say otherwise quite often. Um, you're constantly signing up for things, volunteering, caregiving, at work, at home. You have lots of responsibilities.
Mhm.
And so, this feeling that if I do more, my life will be better, I'll have more meaning, it will be more I'll feel more satisfaction. And so, this constant grind to prove that you're good enough,
Mhm.
strong enough, fast enough, it's almost like a, you know, um, idea in your mind that more is better. We trap ourselves with more. So a lot of women, we're more familiar with the imposter syndrome. A lot of women are familiar with that idea that, man, I've worked so hard, but I just don't feel this sense that I'm good enough. And so they're grinding late hours, long hours, taking on more projects, sitting on every committee, leading organizations, but they're not even asking for the compensation that comes with those titles. So they're actually quite phenomenal, but not, we've all done it, not really being compensated to match the titles. I've seen that so many times. And that imposter syndrome eats away at your retirement, your future. And I used to work in the corporate finance world. So we're all working so that we can enjoy the retirement, but it doesn't get that way if we just grind and don't worry about the compensation. And we can't wait for someone to notice. We actually have to advocate for ourselves a lot better.
That's true. And I think for women, it's sort of this like expectation maybe that we're not going to ask, that we should just do it. But men don't think that way. Men are they're going to ask for it. They're going to take the jobs that they're not quite ready for, but they're going to take it. They're going to plow ahead. But we just have this ability to shrink away from things. Yeah.
Another sign I see a lot of things that we do or take vacation days.
Hmm.
Great. Okay. So how many times have you heard even yourself say, I'm going to take this time off and then I'm going to use it for everybody else, for every project, to clean your house. You're thinking I have to do good even when you're not working. And this is still a bit of imposter underneath the surface, right? And then the martyrdom comes in where you're sacrificing your free time, your well-being, your health,
Hmm.
so that you can still try to, you're like, well, it's a worthwhile cause. I mean, it's my mom, or it's my pet project, or it's my favorite charity. I'm taking time off, but I'm doing something worthwhile. And so you rationalize that this is a good idea and I should do it. But men, you're right, often don't think this way at all.
So, the martyr, that's, um, we're going to dive into that a lot more in this interview, and I'm really excited to talk about that, especially with in terms of COVID. Talk a little bit about perfectionism too. I know that's something that you work with a lot with your clients, and like I'm your total target person. I think there's high-powered women, maybe all of them are your target person, because we all struggle with those same issues and might not even recognize that we do it. And I work with a lot of the same types of people from a bit of a different angle. Mine is more of the wellness, but there's some intersectionality there with overcoming like your self-limiting beliefs and these beliefs about yourself that you have to do these certain things. So can you talk a little bit about how perfectionism plays in?
Yes. One thing that I will say to someone new who comes to me is everything that made you successful is also usually your undoing.
Mm,
So I work with a lot of surgeons and a lot of anesthesiologists and pediatricians and women who run companies or divisions of companies. And the things that have made you a rock star at your job, have put you and propelled you into the corner office, have raised your salary over time, are oftentimes the things that kind of unwind you in the background. You don't want to let go of control because you know best. You know what's right. I call her Miss Fix It. You're like, oh, no, I've got it. Don't worry. So everyone's going home and you're there late and you're there early and you don't delegate and you don't think anyone's good enough to delegate to. This is very common. I see this a lot. And I know that trusting yourself, I help people learn how to really identify those traits that make you good at what you do, find other people to surround yourself with so that you can let go and enjoy your life. There are other rock stars out there, I promise. And if we help identify those traits, we can start to let go.
yes, all of these things. So okay, so now now we have the perfect storm of martyr mindset, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism, triangulating and like circling all the professional women and like ready to attack. And then COVID lands on us, for us who think that it's just going to happen to other people, that it's not really going to like it's just, that's something that happened in Europe and in Asia, not here. So it's here, and it's like worse here than it was anywhere else. And now, especially with doctors, and maybe you could speak more about professional women during COVID also, but now we have these doctors who are like being asked to go to work without PPE, to go to work without maybe getting compensated as well for their extra time or the extra safety issues. Um, Asked to volunteer to go to New York to get paid, without getting paid, to go help out. And a lot of them are starting to push back. A lot of them are, I see kind of two patterns. Like some women are like, not all women, but doctors are like, I'm in, like, let's do this, like full on martyr complex. And some of them are like, back it up. I did not sign up for this. So can you talk about how COVID has brought these issues to light? And I know a lot of people are afraid to speak up for themselves right now because people are getting fired for speaking up or for insisting on wearing masks with their patients, even before that was recommended. What are you doing to help these women speak up for themselves during COVID?
Well, first, let's take just a tiny step back to life before COVID. What I was seeing a lot of was just moral injury, um, slash burnout. And the reason why I still use the burnout term is because burnout is still a constellation, if you will, of depersonalization and cynicism and not feeling like you're making an impact with your work. That was happening before COVID in so many industries where you're a leader. You've got this corporate machine. They're asking for things that maybe don't 100% align with what you signed up for. You're having to lay off employees so that the profits are up. You're getting bonuses for the top, but not the bottom. So all of this was swirling around us. And in the physician world, over 50% of physicians were burned out or had a symptom of burnout
Mm-hmm.
by this Maslow burnout scale and all these things. So Mayo was putting out studies year after year saying over 50% of doctors are burned out or depressed or have suicidal ideation. That was before the drama. So to frame it better, it's like, wow, we were already in trouble and already seeing signs that things weren't going well with the systems in place ahead of this pandemic. Post-pandemic, um, this is a big blow because you're already hanging on to the hope that your career is going to keep you solvent. Most of us are breadwinners in our homes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, our income is so substantial that any threat to it is a problem. And pre-COVID, most people weren't even thinking about diversifying their income enough. So it was a crisis for people who come to me, right? It was a crisis before COVID.
Right.
And I have been talking the talk for a long time, and people didn't feel threatened enough to make a change. So they're like, well, I want to live my best life. And I wrote an algorithm to get a husband. They're like, oh, I want a husband. You have great health. You're enjoying your life. But they weren't motivated as much to make that change pre-COVID because they're like, I've been doing good enough. I think we'll hang in there. Now I'm getting all these calls. They eliminated my entire department. I'm like, but you're a specialist. And they thought they were safe and they're not. Um, I'm getting other calls. Hey, they're trying to force us to work and change our contract terms overnight, but those bonuses are still happening at the top, like we talked about. In the same week, they're giving the bonuses from 2019 to the executive. And my clients are getting calls talking about, we need volunteers and we want you to take a 25, ER doctors are in the front lines, taking 25%, 30% pay cuts, and shifts are being eliminated. Half their income gone overnight,
Yeah.
and it's not up for discussion. So I think step one is looking at just some things that happened before COVID. We were accepting what was given to us. We didn't act as the leader. We didn't act as the hot commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've gotten away with eroding our profession, our pay, our benefits. And now they're basically trying to create a smoke and mirror that, oh, because of COVID, we get to have a free for all.
Mm-hmm.
Unacceptable and mind blowing. But I can't say I'm surprised, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a lot of calls from surprised people
Yeah.
who need to, yeah. See, it's like being in an abusive relationship. You're sleeping with the enemy. You have your OCD, and your OCD is keeping you thinking that you have some control. And then one day he comes home and just, you know, blows up the house and sets it on fire. And you realize everything that I thought I built is not safe or stable.
Mm-hmm.
So that search for stability pre-COVID, now people are more aware than ever that that stability was just smoke and mirrors.
Okay. How much of martyr complex I mean, because there's people who work in jobs where the administrators aren't doing this. You know, there's people who
Sure,
work in jobs where
sure.
that's not happening, but this martyr complex is still a thing. It's still allowing, you know, like, it's just the thought of, I'm supposed to be here for my patients. I'm supposed to be this healer. So how does that play in as well? Because obviously when there's like administrators, and I think there's a hospital in Denver, maybe they took it back, maybe they undid that, but they gave their executives bonuses, while cutting pay, like you were saying for physicians. How does this martyr complex keep us from I guess from speaking out, from sublimating our own worth or our own safety?
Well, most of the time, what I'm seeing is you have this idea that if you just do good for all the right reasons, things have to work out, right? And so the outside world is one thing, but inside us, we have more power than we're actually owning. We have more control over our circumstances than we're owning. But what I hear a lot of from women, especially, is, well, this is what I have to do. because this is what they pay me for, or this is what I have to do in order to feel good about the things that aren't going well in my life.
Mhm.
Um, and we hide by being busy. So there's a lot of things that you really want in life, and they may not be related to your career. Maybe it's you want to travel more. You want to do a nonprofit. I know a lot of women who have a desire to have a small company or do a mentorship program, things that are actually really worthwhile, but they're so worried that they won't be successful because it's something new. They're afraid to take a risk. They're afraid to not be the expert at everything because they're an expert at their job. So their judgment, that fear of judgment, that fear of failure, that fear of not getting it perfect, not getting it right, it throws them into a cycle of taking care of what they do know how to do and that they do well. So they dig in, they double down on the things they do well. So if your profession has worked out for you, you're there a whole lot more, working twice as much, even when the admins aren't asking for that.
Mm.
And it's so, because it's fear. You're running away. So if you had free time, then you could do all those things. So a lot of people are starting to stir now. They're saying, you know what? I clearly do have more time on my hands. I'm stuck at home. I can't be as busy doing my other pursuits
Mhm.
because of the stay-at-home orders, or because they know that they want to they want to do some social distancing. So now they're starting to realize, okay, this has been gnawing at me, keeping me up at night. I should make some plans to allocate those resources and time to things that I really want to do to balance my life and have more joy.
It's cool. It's like COVID is this perfect storm of everything, and it's you're either like no one's going to be the same. I think some people are going to try to go back, which they won't really be able to do. They'll really like that was what was safe, even though it obviously wasn't safe. And then a lot of people are going to be catapulted forward into something that feels a little scary, but it's like there's no other way out of this other than forward. You can't get out of this by going backwards. So, it's interesting as you're talking about this. I had a Zoom call with my girlfriends from my old job in Chicago, and they're all still practicing medicine. A
Mhm.
couple of them have moved out of the city and are in other institutions, but several of them were saying like, I'd love my job again. Like they were feeling almost the opposite of what I've seen so much of like, the patients are all really nice and I'm
Nice.
connecting and I feel like I'm doing it for the reasons that I went into it rather than it's like on another level, it's this beautiful thing where it's like cut out the BS and it's just about taking care of sick people. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's wonderful that you introduced this idea that, there's an upside, right? There is always an upside. One of the patterns of kind of that burnout, that moral injury that people had been suffering with in the medical world, and even in just jobs where you do a lot of service to others, a lot of it was the inefficiency at work. A
Hmm.
lot of it was the red tape at work. A lot of it was just not having autonomy at work. So now they're like, look, we don't have time for that. You do what you need to do. We trust you. We're not coming to micromanage you today. And we're just throw out all those extra, forms that we usually have to use and just do the work.
Hmm.
So the upside, as you mentioned, is that. I also had a consult yesterday that I found really refreshing. And she said, I've never felt the need to dig in and press reset on my life. And now I feel like all those things that have held me back, all those thoughts, I feel like now we're never going to have another COVID uh, disrupt everything. If I'm going to do anything, now's the time to reset my life. So she was talking about her reset. I said, okay. She was selling me on why I should coach her. It was hilarious.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's like when you're ready for the change, you're ready for the change. I was the same way with meditation. I didn't ever, I was like not even pre-contemplative about meditation. I was just like, I do me, and then I got burnt out in 2011 and I was so rock bottom that I was like looking like it cracked open my heart a little bit. And then,
Mhm.
weeks later, I met the person who told me that about this type of meditation. And then, the rest is history. But had I not been at that place where I was open and desperate enough to change, you don't necessarily always make, and not everybody has to get to that rock bottom, but I think I recognized that it was me. I had a moment where I was sitting with a colleague of mine. We were in our cubicles in our hospitalist office, and I was like, "This job sucks, right? We all hate this job." And she was like, "No, I don't know. This job's pretty good." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So like I could try to apply across the street at the other hospital, or I could like take some time off. I did end up taking a few months off, but like ultimately, like I'm the thing that needs to change. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because how do you give that messaging to people without being like, it's not that they deserve it. It's not that anyone deserves the bad things happening to them.
Yeah.
How do you help people understand that you have attracted this into your life, but not because you're bad or unworthy, but just because of the way your brain is wired right now. And that doesn't have to be permanent. What do you talk to people about that?
Say that again. It's so funny too. You know how my imposter set in when I went to write a book. I'm like, well, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not this expert, but I had successfully reprogrammed how I thought about my life, what I can do about it, how I want to live, and how I want to feel when I wake up. And also, what do you want to leave behind when you're done? So you can rewire your life and reprogram your mindset. So that was the name of the book. And people encouraged me to do it because they're like, well, you've successfully done that. So deciding, I think we all have to make a decision on when they read your eulogy, what do you really want it to say? And
Mm.
how do you want to feel each day? I mean, I know that that's a whole continuum, but I don't think most people wake up and take control of their circumstance. I call it the blame, shame, complain game. You were living that for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they think, well, if it's someone else's fault, then I'm allowed to feel this way. If it's, it's almost like they step into a victim role. I don't tell them you've got to change. I remind them, here's what you told me you wanted to build. And if it's not working, we're probably going to have to make an adjustment. And they're willing to do that because their eye is now on the thing that kind of makes them feel energized and happy and joyful. And they're like, you know what? I thought my job was it, or I thought this place was it, or I thought this relationship was it. Some people relocate and they get to a city and they're like, this isn't what I thought it would feel like, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So one day, so do you move back or do we figure out how to make this thing work, at least for now, and then start making some have a clear vision for what you do want? And let's go get that. And most people are willing to change some things to make it happen.
I like that. So it's more just like, let's focus on what you decided you said you wanted.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened. Let's look at that a little bit. That's really cool.
What you're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
So
So how can and how do you see this play out with non-doctors right now in COVID? How
yeah.
do you see things changing? And I know that you mentioned isolation, and you mentioned that in these settings now that how is social distancing or physical distancing, how is that affecting the way that these perfectionist, martyr complex women in and out of medicine start? How is it affecting the way that we are trying to cope, I guess, and trying to hang on to what we can hang on to?
It's a great question. I actually gave a talk to a professional women's network last Friday, and I made sure to give all of the ways you can, text the crisis hotline and get with the suicide line and so on, because what I see a lot of is isolation and people drawing into themselves because they think, well, I'm smart. I've got it together. Why can't I figure this out? They think it's supposed to be self-relying. You're supposed to be self-reliant. And what I think needs to happen, or what I've seen work, is people saying, me too. Like, girlfriend, I'm stressed out. My hair's not done. My house is in chaos. No, I don't know how to do this new math these kids are doing. They're starting to say, yeah, girl, I don't know. Can we talk about it? Can we have like a virtual margarita
Mm.
and figure this thing out? So I've seen a lot more women who had in the past the bad habit of kind of holding away, figuring it out on their own, eating the brownie, is now turning her attention to solutions and people who you're like, look, we're all smart, we're all beautiful. My nanny quit, both of them. I literally had a client who both her nannies quit. And they're like, so what do we do now? All of us, can we talk about it? And more sisterhood and more connectivity and more seeking to find out what has worked for you that probably could work for me because we have similar lifestyles.
Yeah. What do you do for your own self-care during times like this? How do you stay connected? Do you have like a call with friends that you do, or like what do you do to keep yourself from falling into the same pitfalls that so many professional women fall into?
Well, I love what you're doing, and it's holding the coach accountable, right? You're like, what about you? What are you doing? Well, I always say every coach must have a coach or three. And so I have accountability partners that I pay to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I have accountability partner who is a girlfriend, but started off as a business accountability partner. We check with each other really 5, 6, maybe 7 days a week because we're in it, we're grinding, and we know each other and we have similar personalities. So having that accountability person who knows you, and she's like, when you were a little quiet, I want to check in. And then I have a routine. I have my times where here's when I meditate. I'm enjoying your course, by the way. Here's when I meditate. Here's when I, go to bed. I'm keeping a routine for the new normal that helps me to pace myself and not feel like I'm not being so productive. And I have my list and it only has a few things on it, not save the world today.
Yeah.
So, and then I have times when I'm going to talk to my friends, read a book, talk to my parents. And that rhythm has really helped a lot, and also creates a boundary where I don't have to be on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Days I see clients, days I, do other things, so that I'm not feeling pulled in too many directions, even though I'm home more.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, because I do all my work through Zoom now, as most people are doing. If they're lucky enough to work from home, I consider it to be lucky, but I don't know, maybe some other people don't. But
Yeah,
like, it's a little harder to hold that space for people through Zoom. But then I find myself, I had like happy hour with two of my girlfriends last Friday night. And then my friends from Chicago and I, the fun thing is no one has anything to do. So we're like, how about tonight? And then all of a sudden 6 busy women can all just meet.
yeah.
It's so much fun. And it felt so good to just be, I mean, I have a lovely partner, and him and I have a great time relaxing together, but having that other connection, that camaraderie with my friends, you miss that, and it's so nice to be able to have that. No one needs anything from me. It's just like, which I'm happy to provide when people do, but it's
You
nice
said
to
it.
kind of be who you are.
Actually, I think you just hit on a very important point. It's not just doing it and connecting, but who you're connecting with.
Mm-hmm.
Having that safe space where you've got some folks who are just looking out, just hanging out, just enjoying life, just laughing, joking, and enjoying themselves. They don't need anything from you. A lot of people don't have that space, but it's one we have to create.
Mm-hmm. What are your recommendations for people now? Like, if you could give people,
Yeah.
other than reaching out to you, which we're going to also ask for your contact information because
Mhm.
you're amazing and everybody should work with you. But like, what are 3 pretty simple, easy things that people should take away from this interview,
Mhm.
that they can do to get themselves out of the trap?
Well, I'm sure it's a famous quote that, I had a mentor that used to always say to me, um, what got you here won't get you there. So it's okay to kind of scrap everything and just give yourself permission to just have a blank slate. Like, it's okay to give yourself, not wait for other people. You don't need a cosign. You don't need other people to agree with you. You may just want to make some changes. And I think you should just give yourself some space to, to create new things or think new things now that we're in this crisis.
Great.
Yeah,
Um,
that's number one.
that's number 1.
Number one. Number two, I think that you need to kind of put yourself higher in the hierarchy of things. We oftentimes have this duty that we live by. It's like a credo. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to help these people. Especially if you're a caregiver of any kind, we tend to put everybody's needs before our own. I would say the most important thing is to really take care of the caregiver as number one, because there's very few people pouring into your cup. So I don't see that enough. Women who are like, well, it's obvious that I should take care of my needs, my sleep, and not answer emails at 3 a.m. That's not so obvious to them. So I want to kind of remind you that no, sleep's important. Basic human needs are important. You feeling purposeful and needed and rested is important. We should put that higher on the list before we serve everybody.
Yeah. All right. Now what's number 3?
Number 3 is give yourself a chance to connect anew. You know, you have some old relationships, an old supervisor, now's a good time to actually just kind of touch base with things you've let go because you were so doggone busy. Go back and just start weaving that picture back, some family that you didn't talk to. So I feel like mending some, I won't call them fences, but just kind of re-establishing for yourself that foundation of what's really important to you, whether it's your spiritual self, your physical health, your family relationships, your business relationships. I think that people have an opportunity here to shore that back up again. And now's a good time to revisit, where have you let some things go? Maybe it's time for Pilates again, or maybe it's time for you to reach back out to some family that you don't talk to enough.
Mm-hmm.
The basic things help.
Yeah. And what about these poor doctors who are like, I don't want to go to work anymore. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to go if they're not protecting me. Like, I don't want to go in. What do you tell them? What's something
that goes back to putting yourself first. So do no harm starts with you.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. We that should be our punchline for this entire talk. Do no harm starts with you. I'm so sorry to tell you that we put ourselves in a situation where we sold our practices often, or we gave up on the idea that we could do this thing alone. But taking care of you is your job. Taking care of your well-being and physical health is your job. And if you're in a place where you bought PPE and they don't want you to wear it, that's the wrong place. And I stand by that.
Yeah.
So we have to just make that safety and have your personal mission statement be very clear. And if it jeopardizes your ability to be healthy, I was reading about Lorna Breen, the ER doctor at New York Presbyterian Hospital who committed suicide. And I didn't know she was the ER emergency medicine director. She got sick with COVID, recovered from COVID, and a week and a half later, she was back at work, went back. This is the behavior. And she committed suicide, and, we can't know everything. But the disturbing images she was sharing with her family, her father's physician, sounded a lot like a PTSD kind of picture of just having those terrorizing pictures and images in your head. And she just still went back in to fight another day. Some healing time, some personal time. These are things that she certainly deserves, and we all do. And so if you're in the trenches and you need a break, or you don't feel comfortable going in, these are valid. And we need to they have employee programs, EAP programs. Sometimes we have to take FMLA or whatever it takes to protect our mental health. I think we don't put mental health as the top of the list. And that would be another thing I would tell you as part of putting yourself first. Mental health is as important as physical and spiritual health. So we're not prioritizing that enough. And we're saying, well, since I'm physically well, I have to go. That's that martyr showing up again, and it's not true.
And there's such a fear that if I don't, that's the toxic medical culture. I'll be the weak link. I won't be like fulfilling my dream and my mission to help the people, but also I'm making more work for my colleagues. And that's what would make people before COVID come into work like dying and sick because that's what's expected. And now, of course, you're not supposed to do that. So that's like maybe one positive change, but there's that like feeling that if you don't go in, you're somehow less than. If you need this extra time, you're somehow less than. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to keep working on. I'm so glad you brought that up and brought her up, because it's so tragic. I mean, it's always tragic, but it sounds like she was the loveliest, most like greatest person and doctor, but she was, because of the expectations that the system puts on us, and then that we internalize it, we're having these tragic things happen.
Here's the reality. Um, in the traditional context, martyrs die. Martyrs die. A physician commits suicide every single day on average before COVID. The consequences aren't necessarily worth it. And so we have to still think, yeah, I'm putting a burden on my colleagues temporarily, but what happens if you're no longer with us? That's a permanent, the people that love you, the lives you touched, the ones you would have touched if you had taken care of yourself, that doesn't happen. So we have to think a little more globally in our self-care and say, a month to deal with this, to get the care I need, to get plugged into some mental health services, to sit down and think without all the stressors of what I want for my life for the next 10 years, 5 years. These are things that we've earned, and we should prioritize it. And you have a skill set that's transferable. If this ain't the job, there'll be another opportunity for you.
Right. That's true. God, it's so important to remember. And I love this do no harm starts with you, because what you just said, the martyrs die. Like that really hit home with me. That's so major. And it doesn't have to be this catastrophic end.
No.
You can leave what you're doing or change what you're doing or change your approach in a controlled, positive way.
Yeah.
But if it's not the right thing, it's going to make itself clear. And if you don't see the warning signs, then it can be, whether or not that ends in suicide or whether that just ends with you just like quitting your job, like in a blaze of glory. Maybe that's not the way you would have wanted that to happen. Maybe there's something you can do to engineer
A better way.
that's beneficial for everybody, so there's.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that what would you tell your best friend if she was going through trauma? What would you tell your colleague if they said, I've experienced a trauma? We wouldn't say, "Oh, go back in there." Any empathetic person is not going to send you back into the fire if you were just burned, or if you're feeling some effects of that experience. Take a minute. I think asking for help and just connecting with people who understand, and you don't have to explain yourself. I think we often pick the wrong people to say, "Hey, I'm hurt," or "Hey, I'm having a rough time."
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking sometimes to the people who know our pattern, and they're like, "Oh, you don't mean that." They discount your feelings because they're like, "Oh no, you're a go-getter, you're a doer." You're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, I'm kind of having a rough time." So sometimes professional mental, help, mental therapy, things like that, is important. But take the advice you would give yourself is usually pretty safe, because we're usually pretty good about everybody else.
That's so true. Dr. Toni, how can people contact you and work with you who have been, obviously are going to be very inspired by listening to everything you've talked about here, and all your amazingness? How can people reach out, work with you? What kind of programs are you offering right now?
Well, we are developing a couple of things, and I'm going to be having a challenge soon to just kind of bring people together so we can all say, "Oh, you too," and we can have those conversations and we can work through this new reality check that we're dealing with. Whether it's good or bad or an upside, we can talk about what we want. So they can come to alliscalmchallenge.com. We're going to have a 5-day event. Alliscalmchallenge.com. If you just want to sign up for the newsletter, be informed, and get just resources. We usually send out a newsletter at least a few times a month to kind of just keep you plugged into ways to stay on track with your goals. Everybody has them, right? They didn't go away just because COVID came.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to work with me in some of my coaching programs, I just have everyone meet with me so I can hear what's going on with them. I like to know what's going on. So askdrtonymd.com is how you do that. And of course, my website, drtonymd.com, all kinds of information there too.
So I'm sorry, the askdrtonymd.com, that's a website, or is that an email that
That's if you are going to schedule an appointment to do a Soar excellence assessment.
Perfect.
So this is where somebody who's saying, "You know what, I'm not sure what's next. I think I want to make some changes. I want to build something new." That's where they come to me directly, askdrtonymd.com.
Perfect. That's so wonderful. Dr. Toni, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today. This is so important. For anyone listening, if you are feeling like you're struggling or someone who is struggling, suicide prevention hotline. Are there other resources that you would recommend? I know you're not a mental health professional,
Yeah.
but what are you, just to leave people with, in addition to making positive changes, making sure that people are safe, and cared for?
Yeah, I think we're not even establishing regular care with our regular caregivers. I find a lot of my professionals, they are not seeing even their regular healthcare professional. And
Hmm.
now is a great time because telemedicine is really available for people to establish care with a practice. And if you're having any issues to get in there, because when you need help, it's very difficult to get an appointment if you don't have an established relationship with a physician. Very difficult to get in. So I think with just doing regular maintenance for yourself,
Hmm.
I encourage that every time because it's not getting done enough. You're so busy, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for bringing your wonderful energy and expertise to my little show here, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future. So thanks so much for being here.
Take care. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.